Caleb Horn thought moving 3 states away would erase Callie Vex from his life, but the night he woke to find her perfume thick in the air and his phone streaming a live video of himself sleeping, he knew she'd found him again. I never thought much about how love could turn into something dangerous. When I first met Lena, she felt like a dream, someone who made the world feel lighter, warmer, like every day had a new purpose. She was unpredictable in a charming way, always doing something strange but somehow sweet, like leaving flowers in my mailbox or slipping a small note into my jacket pocket without me noticing. I thought it was love, that she was just a little eccentric. But after we broke up, I learned that her unpredictability had a darker side. It started small, and I kept telling myself I was overthinking. I would see her car parked down the street when I came home from work, not right outside, just far enough that she could watch without drawing attention. I'd glance out the window at night and sometimes catch the gleam of headlights turning off, as if whoever was sitting inside didn't want to be seen. I told myself it wasn't heard that it was just a coincidence, but my stomach always knotted in a way that told me otherwise. Then I began noticing things around my apartment that felt wrong. A window slightly open when I knew I'd locked it. My keys not exactly where I'd left them. A picture frame on the coffee table tilted just a little to the side. Each time I'd pause and stare, wondering if I had done it and simply forgotten, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. One night I came home from work and dropped my bag on the couch. My phone was on the counter where I'd left it that morning, but the lock screen had changed. The wallpaper was no longer the simple black background I'd used for months. It was now a picture of me. Not smiling, not posing, just me lying in bed, asleep. My chest tightened, and I felt the air in the room grow heavier. I lived alone. No one had my password. I didn't even know when this photo had been taken. I locked the doors and checked every room, trying to convince myself that someone had broken in while I was gone and left without taking anything. But the more I thought about it, the less sense that made. Why would a stranger do this? The answer kept circling back to Lena. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep right away. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, my ears tuned to every sound. Hours passed like that, each tick of the clock scraping away at my nerves. Eventually, the silence broke, not with a bang, not with footsteps, but with a faint scratching sound from the hallway. It was slow, deliberate, like fingernails against the wall. At first I told myself it was just the building settling, maybe a branch scraping against the side of the house. But the sound moved, creeping closer to my bedroom door. I sat up in bed, my breathing shallow. The scratching paused for a moment, then resumed, this time lower, near the baseboard. My eyes stayed fixed on the door, expecting to see the handle turn. The seconds stretched into minutes, my body frozen in place, until finally the sound stopped altogether. I waited, straining to hear anything at all, but the silence returned so thick it felt like it was pressing against my ears. Eventually, exhaustion won over fear, and my eyelids grew heavy. But just before I drifted off, something made my skin crawl. It wasn't the scratching this time. It was the sudden, overpowering smell of perfume, sweet floral. Unmistakably Lena's. It seemed to seep under the door, wrapping around me until it was the only thing I could smell. I didn't move. I didn't breathe, because I knew, without seeing her, that she had been just outside my bedroom door, and she'd stayed there long enough to make sure I knew. Days passed without any clear sign of her, but the feeling in my chest didn't ease. If anything, the silence made it worse. I told myself that maybe she had moved on, that maybe I was letting paranoia take over. But every time I stepped through my apartment door, I felt that same heavy air, like the place itself was holding its breath. I stopped seeing her car down the street, but that absence didn't bring comfort. It was like she had vanished into the cracks of the city, and that meant she could be anywhere, watching me from a crowd, standing 2 aisles away in a grocery store, passing by my window in the middle of the night while I slept. I started pulling my blinds tight, checking the locks twice before bed, and sleeping with my phone clutched in my hand. Even then, I didn't feel safe. The first sign she was still close came in the form of paper. One morning when I opened my front door to leave for work, a small folded square of white was lying on the doormat. It had no writing on it, just a photograph inside. The picture was of my own shoes, the pair I kept by the door. I frowned at it, wondering how someone had gotten close enough to take it without me noticing. I shoved it in my pocket and tried to forget it, but later that day, when I came home, there was another folded square on the mat. This one was a photograph of my hands resting on my kitchen counter. My stomach turned cold. The angle of the picture was impossible. It was from over my shoulder, and I had been alone in the apartment that morning. The next day, another one came, the back of my neck as I sat at my desk. The skin prickled as I imagined her standing just inches behind me, camera in hand. After that, I started to notice changes in my apartment. A mug turned slightly to face a different direction. A chair pushed back from the table when I hadn't used it. The bathroom light left on. I began searching every corner, even crawling into the attic to see if someone could be hiding there. Nothing. It was late one night when I found the thing that made me realize this wasn't just about her being nearby. She had been inside my home for longer than I wanted to imagine. I opened my bedroom closet to grab a coat, and hanging neatly between my jackets was something that didn't belong, a red scarf. I recognized it instantly. Lena's. I hadn't seen it since before we broke up. My hand hovered over it, afraid to touch it. The scent hit me before I even brushed the fabric-sweet perfume with a faint undertone of something rotten. It made my stomach twist. I took the scarf and threw it in the trash outside, but even after it was gone, I swore I could still smell her perfume in my apartment. It clung to the air like smoke. That night I barely moved in bed, listening for the scratching sound again. It didn't come, but just before dawn, I woke to a faint creak from the living room floorboards, the kind you only hear when someone is shifting their weight, trying not to make a sound. I lay there in the dark, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't dare get up. I told myself it could have been the wood settling, but I knew the truth. There was no wind, no draft, no reason for a floorboard to bend under weight unless someone was standing there waiting. When the sun finally came up, I forced myself to check. The living room looked exactly as I had left it, but on the coffee table, where there had been nothing the night before, was another photograph. This time, it was of me in bed taken from the doorway. I thought getting away from my apartment for a while would help, so I packed a bag and went to stay at a friend's place across town. I didn't tell them the real reason. I just said my building was having plumbing work done and I needed somewhere to crash. The first night there felt strange but safe. Their home was bright, busy, full of sounds I wasn't used to. TV humming, the refrigerator kicking on, the occasional creak of the floor from someone moving around. For the first time in weeks, I almost convinced myself the worst was behind me. But safety is fragile and it doesn't take much to shatter it. By the second night I started noticing little things. My backpack, which I had left zipped by the bed, was open when I woke up. Nothing was missing, but the contents were rearranged clothes, neatly folded, toiletries lined up in a perfect row. That precision made my skin crawl. Whoever had done it had taken their time. The next morning I stepped into the hallway and almost tripped over my shoes. I had left them by the door, but now they were placed side by side, perfectly parallel, facing inward toward the apartment. A small thing, maybe, but it reminded me too much of the photographs left at my own place. On the third night, something happened that I couldn't explain away. My friend's dog, normally friendly and curious, refused to enter the guest room I was sleeping in. It would stand in the doorway, ears back, staring into the corner by the dresser. Its growl was low and constant, almost like it was trying to warn me. I checked the corner, of course, nothing but shadows and the hum of the air conditioner. Still, the dog wouldn't come in. That night, I kept the lamp on. I woke sometime after midnight with the distinct feeling that I wasn't alone. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of a wall clock, but there was a heaviness in the air that made it hard to breathe. My backpack was unzipped again, its contents disturbed. This time, on top of my neatly folded clothes, there was something else in an old photograph of me and Lena. It had been taken early in our relationship, both of us smiling, her arm around my shoulder, but her face was different now. The eyes in the photo had been gouged out, leaving torn holes in the paper. The smile was still there, but without the eyes, it felt warped, wrong. The next day I told my friend I needed to go back to my apartment. I made up some excuse about wanting to be in my own space. But really, I felt like staying away was making things worse. Whatever this was, it wasn't limited to my home. When I walked back into my apartment, I was hit by the same stale, heavy air I'd been trying to escape. Everything looked the same, but my body tensed as if it knew better. I checked each room methodically, moving from the kitchen to the living room to the bedroom, but I couldn't find anything out of place until I reached the center of the living room. My foot caught on something soft. I looked down and froze. It was a small pile of blonde hair, not cut neatly, not brushed, smooth, just a tangled mess of strands, like it had been yanked out. The sight made my stomach twist, but what made it worse was that I recognized the shade instantly. Lena's hair. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The curtains fluttered slightly, though the windows were shut tight. My chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself, every breath harder than the last. That night I sat on my bed with my back to the wall, staring at the door. I didn't sleep. I barely blinked. I knew if I closed my eyes for too long, I might open them to find her standing there, watching, and maybe this time she wouldn't stay on the other side of the door. I told myself I needed proof, something real, something I could show to someone else so they would believe me. Without it, I was trapped in this cycle of fear and disbelief, wondering if I was just imagining everything. So that night, I set my phone on the dresser, angled toward my bed, and left it recording before I climbed under the covers. I kept the lamp on, thinking the light might be a deterrent, but the shadows in the corners still felt alive, stretching and shifting in ways my mind didn't like. I lay there, eyes darting to the bedroom door every few minutes, waiting for a sound, a movement, anything that would confirm what I already knew. At some point, exhaustion overtook me, and I slipped into a restless sleep. When I woke the next morning, the first thing I did was grab my phone. My heart was pounding before I even opened the video, as if part of me knew I wasn't going to like what I saw. The first few hours were uneventful, just me shifting in my sleep, the faint glow of the lamp keeping the room dim but visible. Then, at 3:17 a.m., the bedroom door slowly began to open. It didn't swing wide, it didn't creak. It just eased forward, inch by inch, until there was enough space for something to slip through. A tall shadow stepped into the room. It moved in complete silence, no hesitation, no searching around like it didn't know the space. Whoever it was knew exactly where they were going. The figure didn't come toward the bed. Instead, it crouched in the far corner of the room, the one I could never quite see clearly at night. Once it settled there, it didn't move again. For the rest of the recording, it stayed perfectly still. Watching, I leaned closer to the screen, my throat tightening. In the faint light from the hallway, I could just make out a pale face framed by matted, damp hair. The strands clung to her skin, like she had been standing in the rain, or maybe like she'd just climbed out of somewhere wet and cold. Her eyes were wide open, reflecting just enough light to gleam unnaturally. And the smile, it stretched too far, pulling at her cheeks in a way that didn't look human. I wanted to believe it was some distortion from the camera, some trick of the light. But then I realized something that made my skin crawl. The figure wasn't watching me. She was looking straight into the camera, into my eyes. The worst part was how long she stayed there. Hours passed on the recording, and she never shifted, never blinked. Even when the faint light from the hallway faded and the shadows swallowed her completely, I could still sense her presence in the darkness, a shape that refused to dissolve. When the video ended, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the corner where she had crouched. It looked empty now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that emptiness was a lie. That night, I didn't set up the camera again. I didn't want more proof. Proof meant she was real. Instead, I slept with the lights blazing and my back pressed against the headboard, my eyes darting to that same corner over and over. The silence felt heavy, almost deliberate, as if she knew I was waiting for her to move. Just after midnight, the air shifted. It was subtle, like the room exhaled. I glanced at the corner, and for a split second, I thought I saw the outline of someone standing there. My breath caught, my body locked in place. I blinked, and it was gone, but the smell lingered. That same sweet, rotting perfume that had haunted me since the first night. It wrapped around me like invisible hands, and I knew she'd been there again, watching, waiting, and this time she hadn't needed to be caught on camera to let me know. I couldn't stay there any longer. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow that stretched too far felt like her. I packed my things in the middle of the night, shoving clothes and essentials into a bag without caring if I left half my life behind. I didn't even turn the lights off when I left. I wanted the place to look as if I might walk back in any second, as if maybe that would keep her from following. The streets were empty, slick with the reflection of streetlights on damp asphalt. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting at any moment to see her car creeping up behind me. But the road stayed dark, and the only sound was the hum of my tires. I drove until the city gave way to stretches of highway, long and silent, broken only by the occasional gas station or flicker of neon from a roadside diner. By the time exhaustion forced me to stop, I was miles from home. I pulled into a small, weathered motel just off the road. The paint on the sign was peeling, and the flickering light made it hard to tell if it was even open. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions when I paid in cash. He slid me a key without a word, and I headed to the farthest room at the end of the row. The moment I stepped inside, I locked the door and shoved a chair under the handle. The room smelled faintly of bleach, but underneath was something damp and musty, like the air hadn't moved in years. I set my bag down, drew the curtains, and sat on the bed staring at the door until my eyes blurred. I told myself I was safe here. She didn't know where I was. Sleep came in short bursts. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined her standing outside the door, leaning her ear against it, waiting for the right moment to come in. I woke sometime in the early hours to a sound that was so faint I almost thought I'd dreamed it. A slow, deliberate dripping. It was steady, too precise to be random. I sat up, straining to listen. It was coming from the bathroom. My throat tightened as I swung my legs off the bed and stood. The carpet felt cold under my bare feet as I crossed the room. The light in the bathroom was off, but the sound was clearer now, its drop landing with a soft pat, like water hitting porcelain. I flicked the switch, and the dim bulb above the mirror buzzed to life. The sink was dry, the shower was dry. I leaned closer, trying to pinpoint the source, and that's when I saw it. Across the surface of the mirror were streaks of condensation, smeared in uneven lines. My name had been traced through the fog, each letter wet and glistening. The smell of her perfume hit me hard, cloying and sweet. But it wasn't just my name. Underneath it, in smaller letters, were two words that made my chest seize up. I never left. My gaze lifted slowly to the reflection behind me. She was there, standing in the corner of the motel room, barely lit by the thin strip of light from the door. Her hair was damp again, sticking to her face in uneven clumps. That smile, the too wide strained curve of her lips, looked even more unnatural this close. And in her hands, she held something glowing faintly. It was my phone. The screen was lit, and even from across the room I could see the image moving on it. A live video feed. I took a step closer without meaning to, my breath coming shallow. It was me, on the bed sleeping, but in the feed, I wasn't alone. She was sitting beside me, watching me in the dark, her head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on my face. I spun around, but the corner was empty, the phone was gone. The room was silent again. For a moment, I wondered if my mind had finally snapped under the weight of it all. But when I turned back to the mirror, the words were still there, wet and dripping, the scent of her perfume choking the air. And from somewhere just beyond the thin motel wall, I thought I heard it again, slow, rhythmic scratching, moving closer.